Okay, let me start with the review of chapter number 11. Uh, chapter number 11 was about practical insights into wisdom. Uh, since life is unpredictable and full of randomness, the critic suggests some of the suggestions towards true wisdom. And we saw 9 points there. The first one was senseless generosity in verse number 1. And there we talked about people should do some senseless giving away, especially those who have deep pockets. Then I also said that senseless generosity refers to silent work, hopeless work, and unappreciated work. Then we talked about sacrificial generosity. We talked about painless generosity. And then I said that these generosities were taking care of many days, evil days, and sad days. I hope you will refer back to your notes. The fourth point was useless over analysis. Then we talked about the need for God. Then we talked about diversifying our sources. Then aspiring for the light, be it artificial, natural, intellectual, scriptural, spiritual, or eternal. Light in all its form is sweet. Then verse 8 talked about expecting darkness. A bulk of our days will be sad and sorrowful. So expecting the sad days will help us enjoy the good days better. And then we talked about expect judgment, bringing cheer to your heart and fulfillment to your eyes, uh, but never forgetting a God who misses nothing and will call each and every one to judgment. Okay, let's delve straight into chapter number 12. The critic brings everything to a culmination in this chapter, and we can see him considering God from the end of the last chapter itself. The last two verses where that know that all these God will bring you into judgment, and that's how he ends chapter number 11. He brings God there, and now he begins chapter 12 on a very different note, peculiar note. Let's read verse 1. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Now, it's interesting to note that chapter 12 begins by referring to God as a creator for the very first time. So far he was alluding to God, especially in the initial chapters, and then he started referring to God, but now he has brought in the whole aspect of creator. See, you have to understand that the moment you remove the idea of a creator from God, the need for accountability vanishes immediately. But when you acknowledge God as a creator, it makes him the owner, not just the maker, but the owner of everything, and immediately brings into us the need to be accountable to this owner and the creator. The critic realizes this. In all the 11 chapters, he tried to avoid it, but now he realizes that there is no hiding from the creator. He is a part of this system, and if we do manage to run away from him, we will stand before him anyhow after our life is over. So there is no use running from him. It is better to face the creator now than to face him later. Then we also see that the first word he says is remember. Now, remember means he is recalling something which is already in memory. But it could mean two different things, in the sense that remembering God for who God is and what his desires are, and remembering what God has done for us. So remembering means it can mean two different things. So remembering God for who he is and what he wills, it means that you remember that there is a God, he exists. You remember that his character is holy, good, righteous, true. He will not tolerate anything outside of this. You remember that he provides for everything in your life. You remember his words and his teachings and his guidelines, and you remember his will for the world and in and through the church. Now, there could be many more things added to that, but Basically, when we remember God for who He is and what He purposes, is one of the ways of remembering God. But other way is what He has done for us and our response to that. So be thankful for what He has done. Remember and be thankful for what He has given us and done for us. Remember and be obedient to what He demands of us in each aspect of our life. Remember to be watchful that you do not go too far away from Him. Remember that you are dependent and therefore pray. Remember that you should be desirous to know Him more. Remember to worship Him, for He alone deserves it from us. So remembering can be so many things. It is not just bringing a picture of mind in a picture of God in your mind for 2 seconds and then go on with. That's what remembrance is for us. When you say, okay, remember your God, immediately there is some vague picture that flashes through our mind and that's it. But when the critic is saying, and even otherwise, whenever we are to remember God, we have to remember a little more detail about Him than just some kind of a vague imagery flashing through our mind. Verse 1 also says that remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Now, youth is the age when you definitely do not want to remember or consider God. Therefore, the critic gives it like a command. We can also think of the critic using the word consider. The word remember can also be replaced with the word consider. So it's as if he's demanding the young people to consider God among the several things that they are considering and find out that He is good. Okay, but why youth? Why is the focus on the youth? Why has somebody to remember in his youth? One of the reasons is that habits are still not formed, so that person is very new and he can learn about God very fast and adapt it for his lifeline. That's why the proverb says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Another reason why youth, because they can start on a direction early when they are much younger, before hormonal or moral upheaval stages come and mess up his life. A youth, because they can have a long haul. That means they can start early and then walk longer with God if they have a long life, and they can cover a great amount of work. Why young? Because they can grow more if they start early. They can come closer to God. They can grow more in the Word. They can grow more in the anointing, in the grace of God. Why young people? Because they are not encumbered by relationships and responsibilities, and so they are available, and also they are capable and willing to do much more than the grown-ups. So therefore, why not? Why youth? Also because it's the right page, and these people, they put in their best at this age. Why youth? Is why not old? Looking at why not remember the Creator when you are 60 plus? Because when the government tells you sit at home and says that please sit at home, we'll send in the salary, and that's when you start seeking God. When nobody wants you, when your children also want you only as babysitters or undercover watchmen or security guards in your house, that's when you remember God. When the best of your life has already been given to the world, and whatever now remains you want to give to God, then that is unfair to God, because God did not give the leftovers. God gave the best portion to us. God gave His one and only Son. God gave His image. God gave His likeness. God gave the Holy Spirit to dwell inside of us. God gave us His name. God is preparing what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived. So God has given Himself. He says, I am your portion. When He has given the best of Himself to us, why should we not give our best to Him? And what better time in a man's life than to give his youth? So remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Then verse 1 continues to say that before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. That means there will be days in a man's life when he lives long which will be difficult days. Some of the translations call it when the evil days come. What are the evil days? Evil days could mean old age, when a man becomes frail, has no physical strength, cannot do what he did. Evil days also could be the days when habits are formed and things become more difficult to exercise, because for everything you want to do, your habits, your routines, what you have learned comes in your way. Evil days also mean troubles that come by because the fights that you now have to do for the bigger responsibilities and the greater relationships that you have, the fights that you have to do will bring in more trouble. So that means more difficult days, more evil days. So evil days are going to come, be it physical, be it financial, or be it physiological, psychological. As a man's age progresses, he should expect more difficult days to come. Critic says, consider God when you are still young and do not wait till you are old. These things will make it difficult for you to change your course, because if you do change your mind in the middle of your evil days, for example, you have already crossed a certain threshold of your life, you are already married, or you are already into a career, and then you remember your creator, or you are now going to hit the pensionable age, and then you remember your creator. By then, a lot of these difficult days are already onto you, and now you suddenly decide that I want to be dedicated to my creator. What the critic says is, you may still have to go through those difficult days, because they will run their course, they will finish what they have to do. See, whatever we gather up in our race, a lot of these things will latch on to us, and we will have to get through and finish that course. And that means you will definitely desire to be devoted to the Lord, but you will not be able to do it. It is very difficult for people who are married and older to commit their life to the Lord. But there is one statistical survey which says that 90% of the people who have accepted Christ in their life, 90% of believers in the world have done it before the age of 25. So it is very, very crucial, because that's, if you have decided before that age, it is very sure that you will stick on to it. Once you are through that age, it becomes very difficult for people to give up. We know from our families that people who have believed in other belief systems for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, how difficult it is. Even if they see it very clearly that it is not right, they still find it difficult to let go. Forget about other religions, even within our Christian denominations, it is so difficult to let go of the nominal Christianity and come into that experience where you are actually living and walking the Bible. So that's why the critic says, better to be early on the learning curve than to learn after going through a lot of travails and pains and after suffering heavy losses. Let me go into the next verse. It actually begins the definition of evil days, and it goes on to verse number 5. So verse number 2 to 5 is one solid bunch, and which tells us about what are the things that happen in the evil days. Now here a lot of physical and physiological references are there. So basically it is aging. Now you don't have to think of aging as beyond 70. Once you are through your youth and middle age, I would say once you cross 35, then you start hitting all the signs of aging. And as your age progresses, you will see that a lot of your body organs and parts are getting affected slowly. It could be BP, it could be diabetes, or it could be even small cramps, it could be sudden body weight, it could be loss of vision, loss of hearing, it could be a loss of memory, it could be a loss of physical strength and capacity, it could be the inability to do several things as fast as you did earlier, so the processing of information is slow. It could be you're not able to do 10 things as you used to do when you were young. Now you're only able to do 2 things. Anything can happen, okay? But we will go through these verses and see what they are saying. Let's look at verse 2. Verse 2 says that while the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain. So the first thing it says is about the sun, the light, and the moon. Now, these could refer to the countenance of a man, the look, the face of a man, which could have been darkened by the age. They look the best when they are in their just finished their youth. About the time they can get married is when they usually look their best. But then, as they start aging, the countenance of that man goes. The sun, the light, the shine on the face, the radiance is going. That could be one of the meanings. Other meanings is that it refers to understanding, mental reasoning capabilities, judgment, thinking abilities, affections, willpower. So these kind of things will start, dimming down. They will not be as glowing as they used to be. And stars usually refer to fancies and dreams and ideas in the mind. So as you grow older, all these get affected. Then it says, the clouds do not return after the rain. Now, what that means is, see, after rains, people expect a little reprieve. They expect a little sunshine. But if the rains are followed by dark clouds and that bring more rain, it is a severe inconvenience, because this means that after the rain, again rain is coming. So there is no time for you to go out and do some stuff. It means series of troubles that keep coming at you. Before one gets over, the other begins. So there is no respite between the troubles, no rest from the travails. So clouds return after the rain is what verse number 2 says. Verse number 3 says, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men bow down, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look through the windows grow dim. Now, keepers refer to our hands. They are like gatekeepers. They are the ones, the body parts that protect us. And the critic says there will come a time when we grow older and the hands will not be as steady anymore, will not have so much of strength, will not be able to protect ourselves so much, but they will tremble, or they will have cramps, or they will have serious issues, unlike when you were young. So do not, it's interesting that, when he is talking about all this, he is using the body, and he is comparing the body to a palace that is going into ruins. Okay, so first is the keepers, then he says the strong men bow. Strong men refer to the feet, that's why it is plural, men. The strong men refer to the feet and the knees, which are the strongest parts of our body. But as we grow older, they will bow, means they will not have the strength they used to have. They will not be able to take what they used to take. I also feel that it could refer to the backbone, the spine, which stoops or bows with age. Then it says that when the grinders cease because they are few. Grinders refers to the teeth. Some of these have fallen, and chewing becomes a difficult task. Even when you grow old, the things you used to eat, you will not be able to eat, because either your gums are hurting, or you are not able to chew because some of your teeth are bleeding, or there is a decay in the teeth. So all kinds of problems start with the teeth. That is what it says. And then it says that those that look through the windows grow dim. It's talking about the eyes. The eyelash, not the eyelashes, the eyelids are the windows through which the eye looks out, and they become dim. That means they lose the power of vision. Then you get glasses, and then you get cataracts, and dark and white cataracts, and you get glaucoma, and every kind of trouble starts on your eye. So that is what verse number 3 is saying. So it's constantly talking about the evil days and what all start coming. Then verse number 4 says, when the doors are shut in the streets and the sound of grinding is low, when one rises up at the sound of a bird and all the daughters of music are brought low. So all this sounds like poetry, but the critic is actually mentioning about our body shutting down. So then he says that doors are shut in the streets. It's talking about our lips, and it refers to that lips are no longer communicating as they used to. They are not talking much anymore. There is an intentional cutoff maintained from the streets. When the door is closed, that house doesn't want to be disturbed by the street and the noise in the street. So the mouth is kept closed. That mouth, which used to be so busy when it was much younger, is intentionally kept quiet when it is in the marketplace or when it is among people. One of the reasons could be that those in the street do not speak the same language. That means, see, once you start aging, the generation gap starts appearing. So now, when you are with the crowd, you suddenly are out of sync with the topics that are discussed in the group. It is no longer your interest, and you don't know what they are talking. So you prefer to be quiet and you speak less. That could be one of the things. The second reason will be that old people having to keep their lips closed while eating because of the fear of food falling out from it, though that's a funny reason, but it could be one of the reasons why it says doors are shut in the streets. And the sound of grinding is low. Now, this is not referring to hearing. That sound of grinding is low. What it means is, now you are not able to digest what you could digest earlier. So in your young days, you could eat anything and you would still be absolutely all right the next day. But now, as you grow older, small things can upset your stomach. Your digestive system becomes much more sensitive. And the sound of grinding refers to what's happening in the digestive system. So it is not referring to hearing, but the loss of appetite. So the old are not able to eat as they used to, and they do not even crave for food as much. Now, as I say all this, I want to remind you that don't think of a 70-year-old person when I'm saying old. You can consider me, you can imagine me when you are hearing all this. It is for anybody who has gone past the age of 35. These things will slowly start appearing. Though Solomon is listing all, everything need not be there in everybody. But these are the kind of different symptoms that come up inside old people. The last thing there it says is two more things. When one rises up at the sound of a bird. So what does that mean? Hearing is there. The smallest voices will wake him up. The first bird in the morning takes his sleep away. See, first of all, they'll sleep early because they can't stay awake, and then they will sleep light. In the sense, small sounds will wake them up, and the first bird will wake them up, and they'll sit there. Actually, they will get up out of fear, as if something is going to happen to them. They're very alert to small noises. This usually happens when people are older. And all the daughters of music are brought low. What does this mean? It means that the person is no longer able to appreciate or enjoy music anymore as he used to when he was younger. That is one of the meanings. Second is that it could also mean, because it's saying daughters of music, it could mean all the organs that work together to make music or singing, a pleasurable exercise. So it could be the lungs and throat, lips, tongues, ears. They all work together to make a song. So all these actually start getting affected. You're not able to sing as you used to, and your ability has been brought low. So this is what happens when the evil days come. Let me look at the last point raised about the evil days in verse number 5. It says that also they are afraid of height and the terrors in the way. When the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden and desires fail. For man goes to his eternal home and the mourners go about the streets. Afraid of heights. A time will come when you no longer fancy heights, either because it is a very hard ordeal climbing up, or because there is breathlessness when you reach there after all that effort, or there is dizziness in the head after climbing. So you are afraid of heights because of purely physical reasons. But you can also think of it as once you are a little older, heights in the corporate world are also no longer easier, because your decision making does get affected, and you will be there. You will be wanted up there for your experience, but you will always have a council of people surrounding you to help you take the right decisions. And uneasy lies the head that wears the crown is not a saying without any reason. If you're afraid of heights and of the terrors in the way, so they will be afraid of venturing out because of the fear of tripping and falling, or out of fear of not being able to come back home, or forgetting their way, or out of fear of losing their balance or falling. They will dread going out of the house. They will dread taking the car and driving. My dad, if you ask him to drive, he thinks twice before going, because he's very, very scared of what will come against him and what will he do when certain things happen, because the decision making and the courage has really taken a hit. So they look at anything that comes in their way as terror. Some of them could even be afraid of other terrors that wait for them on the way, like an accident or bad luck or evil spirits. The almond tree blossoms. What it means is that you will have gray hairs on your head, which of course are beautiful, but it is an announcement of who you are. Before you reach, your gray hair tells everybody how old you are or who you are, and therefore it results in a lot of prejudice, sometimes in favor, sometimes against you. Anyway, the white leaf of the almond, whenever the almond becomes white, is a signal that its fruit is no longer valuable or market worthy. So when you are older, your ideas, your suggestions, and your advices might be honored because of the experience, but it needs to be seen how much it will be appreciated. And older people may say things, but the younger generation always has a tendency to put them down and say that you will not know because times have changed. And then it says the grasshopper is a burden. What it means that even if a grasshopper climbs on you, you feel like it's a heavy burden on you. That is one of the meanings. It could also refer to the difficulty in bending and lifting things. Even the grasshopper is heavy. You don't know. You find it difficult to lift up things which you lifted up very easily earlier. It also means that motion and movements have got restricted. You are not able to move as nimbly as you used to. And it could also mean that your sexual appetite has faded away. So there is a reference of grasshoppers with a sexual appetite also. And therefore the next word it says is that desires fail. So there is no kind of a desire, no kind of a desire which is actually very, very aggressive and active. And when it says the word desire over there, it uses the word abionev. Abionev is kind of a berry fruit, which was an aphrodisiac, which means it increases the sexual appetite of a person. So if you eat that berry fruit, you get sexually excited. But even eating that fruit is not going to impact you. There will be no change in you. You will have no desire. And that is how you get affected in your old age. So that desire might be still there in your mind, but your body gives up. The last thing it says is that the man goes to his eternal home and the mourners go about the streets. And finally, after all this aging and all these things happening to his body being tattered from all directions, each individual part going through different kinds of struggles, finally he dies. And he goes to a place from where he will neither return nor go anywhere else to. He will rest there. It could be Hades or paradise. Here he refers to it just as the grave. But we know that he will go to a resting place called Hades or paradise, and he'll wait. He'll wait over there. The only company he gets will be up to the grave, where the mourners, the relatives, the friends, everybody will come. Or it could even be professional mourners, because in those days they used to hire mourners so that they give him a good goodbye, a final adieu. Okay, so let me go ahead. Now verse number 6 says, remember your Creator. Again it says, remember your Creator. So now it's going to give you another set of reasons. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loose, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. And then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to the God who gave it. Remember before things fall away. That's what he's trying to say. Silver cord loosed. In the olden times, these lamps in the palaces were held together by silver cords. Golden bowl is broken. So golden bowls were used to carry the oil for burning the light. Pitcher shattered at the fountain. So it refers to pitcher that's taken to the well for water that is needed for drinking, for living, and the wheel broken at the well, at the cistern. It refers to that wheel which is used as a pulley to take the water outside from inside of the well. So that wheel is broken. Now, what all these metaphors above refer to is the breaking apart of the human conglomerate. What is the human conglomerate? The soul, the spirit, and the body. They are all attached together in a very wonderful way. But there will come a day when this conglomerate will fall apart. The silver cord refers to the soul. The golden bowl refers to the pitcher refers to the body, and the oil inside the golden bowl refers to the spirit which is inside of that bowl that carries it. So the body, the soul, the spirit, they are all held together in a very peculiar way, but all these attachments will break off, and suddenly they are not able to remain together. It could also be seen as a reference to the internal organs like heart, liver, and the attachments that keep the bones and the muscles together. What happens is at death, all these attachments that make us human beings, that make us move, that make us do things, that make us individuals, that makes us identities of our own, all these connections, they break apart. It says that there is coming a day when these things will no longer work together. And what will happen? Dust will return to dust, and the spirit will return to its giver, that is God. Everything will go back to where it came from. And what you thought were you disintegrates completely. Now, I want you to remember that when we say that the spirit returns to God, we should not take it as a concept of moksha or nirvana, where the spirit gets united to the spirit being, supreme being. The spirit goes and waits for the order of God in what to follow next. So it waits in Hades or it waits in Paradise. And what follows is judgment, because the Bible says it's once ordained for man to die, and then there is judgment. And since this is the end of all things, that's why in verse number 8 he says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. Whatever we think we have on earth or have achieved on earth is vanity. It's not fulfilling. It is hevel, it is smoke. It only becomes meaningful in the context of an eternity, and only God allows people into that realm. See, if you think of everything as just ending up as dust and the spirit going back, and everything that happens before is just left over here, then it is all meaningless. You cannot bring any meaning to it, because at the end of the day, everything disintegrates and the dust goes back to dust. But the moment you bring in the concept of eternity, that there is a life beyond, suddenly it becomes more meaningful. So, unless the context of eternity and God is brought in, what we are today is just dust and vapor. So that's why he says that if we look from only that angle, everything we are doing is vanity. Now in verses 9 and 10, 11 and 12, you will see he makes a case for himself, who the critic and the author, they together now blend and they make a case for themselves. Though they are now announcing everything as meaningless and vanity, they make a case for themselves. Because if everything is vanity, who wants to listen to the critic? Who will want to listen to the author or his wisdom? because anyways it is vanity. But he says that moreover, despite of everything being vanity, the teacher did not stop teaching wisdom and knowledge to everyone, because as long as we live, knowledge and wisdom are necessary. So that's what he says, that we kept on teaching. We taught the people knowledge. Yes, the preacher pondered and sought after and set in order many proverbs. That's verse 9. Preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright words of truth. And he says, the words of the wise are like goads, and the words of the scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. And the further, my son, be admonished by this, of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. Now, it is quite interesting what he is saying here. He is saying that the teacher did not stop teaching wisdom and knowledge to everyone. He also kept pondering and seeking about things he considered as wisdom and knowledge. That means he didn't stop at that, at what he had received. He constantly strived to update himself. He didn't feel that he had reached the destination. He kept learning new things. So he kept on adding to it, but he did not radically change what conclusions he had come. He just kept on probing. Then he says that he published the proverbs. That is, proverbs are wisdom packed in sentences, small sentences. They are packaged wisdom. So he published proverbs that can become useful for many. Then he also says that he just didn't perpetuate oral teaching. Many of the wise men, they just do oral teaching. He says that I just didn't stop at oral tradition of wisdom and knowledge, but I chose the right words, made sure I had the best of words to convey the meaning that I had in my mind. I wrote them down to let us know how sure he was. See, when a person says something, he can say anything, but when he writes down, it is a commitment. It is saying that, okay, what I am writing down is what I wholeheartedly stand behind. So a written word is more powerful than a spoken word. So he wrote them down to let us know that he was very sure of what he had learned and concluded, and how sincere he was in putting them down. It also means that he thought of the generations to come, because he believed that nothing new happened under the sun. Then he continues by saying that the words of a wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails. What he's saying is that any wisdom coming from anywhere, any preacher, is good. You should grab it, because they are like goads. Goads are these sticks which have pointed edges, which shepherds or cattle keepers, they carry with them to poke the animal, to keep them on the right direction. So wisdom coming from anywhere is like goads. It keeps you in the right direction. It pierces the body of the animal, but it pierces our mind. It is useful. Gather as much wisdom from wherever you can get. And the collection of wisdom, suppose it's a book that you get where there is a lot of wisdom inside of it. It's like nails that are well fastened, so it's something that is pretty useful for you and will remain with you, because all wisdom, it says, comes from one true shepherd, and that is God. And then it says in verse 13 that furthermore, my son, be admonished by this, that of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. It says that I said that gather as much wisdom as you can, but then I want to add a caveat. And what is that? That books will continue to be written, and people always will find something to write about, and there will be no end to it. However, studying everything, knowing everything, all that will only make your body weary, and it might not actually add too much to your wisdom. So don't get addicted to it, is what he's saying. Don't get addicted to it. We need to make a wise choice when we are younger. Remember the Creator, because ultimately our body is going to go into this, but what we need is wisdom along the way, and wisdom to take this very decision. So now he's summing up in verse number 13 and 14. He says that the summary of all wisdom, the summary or crux of all wisdom that you can attain in the world can be packed into this following words: fear God and keep His commandments. Fear God and keep His commandments. That means you acknowledge God. Fear God means you acknowledge God. You understand who He is, what He demands, why He demands, and what is the consequence of what could be if we do not fear Him. Understand all that and keep His commands. This is the first time the critic is using the word commandments of God. So that means so far he was not wanting to be limited by rules and commandments. But by chapter 12 he says that it is better to fear God because He is a force working on you. Fear God in a good way and keep His commandments. He has come to a stage where he is surrendering his freedom to do whatever his heart desired and his eyes lusted after. If you remember in the earlier chapters, he said that I have not refrained anything from myself. I got everything that my heart desired and my eyes lusted after. So there was a freedom that he enjoyed. There was no curtailing it. There was no rule, no commandment that stopped him. But when he considered that what finally happens to a man, he says the commandments of God are valuable and they are useful, they are beneficial. Man should not cross these fences. There are some good intentions in the commandments of God. So we need to do them in sincere reverence and love of God. And that's how he ends. He says that doing them is the whole perfect duty of any man who is living on this planet. There is nothing better for a man to do than to fear God and do His commandments. Now, man will be judged for all his thoughts, deeds, whether it be seen or unseen, whether it be good or bad. He will have to give an account of everything. So let me close the 12th chapter and the entire book of Ecclesiastes. In the last verse, when he says that God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil, Solomon actually brings meaning back to everything under the sun. Because if you read that verse, it means that if every secret thing, every good and bad thing is going to be judged, that means nothing that happens under the sun is after all meaningless. It may be meaningless to us in the sense that it does not give us what we thought it will give us. It will not give us fulfillment. It will not give us that sense of purpose. It will not give us what we aimed for and dreamt of that it will give us. But whatever happens under the sun, good or bad, high or low, sorrow or joy, sickness or health, rich or poor, success or failure, fame or seclusion, health or weakness, youth or childhood, old age or middle age, whatever happens in all these circumstances, there is a meaning to it, because the eyes of God are on these things. He is considering everything. Everything we say or do or think, everything that we go through, every reaction, every response we have, it's going to add up. And God is interested in the net result. He will evaluate every response. He will evaluate every decision we have made. He will evaluate every situation. And then He will judge us. So that means whatever happens under the sun may be meaningless from our perspective, but it is absolutely meaningful when we look at it from the perspective of God. So, seeing things from the perspective of God makes everything meaningful. So, though the chapter begins with a very loud hue and cry about meaninglessness of life, we saw that meaninglessness was in the way it fails to give us meaning. But everything is meaningful because God's hand and God's eyes are behind it. May God bless you through this learning. Many of the practical aspects that we learned during the course of this study, may it be useful for you, may you recall it. I have had discussions with people, and I have often recalled some of these verses immediately. They all came to me because I went through this entire book verse by verse. So suddenly somebody comes up with a dialogue, and then the verse comes up from in my mind that yes, this is what Solomon said, this is what the critic said. So there were very wonderful learnings through this whole book. I really enjoyed it. It was a challenging book. It took hours and hours and hours to bring together, but it definitely has ended up on a very positive note, bringing us back to God. So we did not learn anything new because we were all followers of God. We remember our Creator in our good days. We are doing it, but yet, to be affirmed of so many things along the way has been a great time. Thank you, everybody, for faithfully coming and joining through these classes. It's been difficult for you. You've set apart that time and silently heard everything. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that, and I sincerely pray God's blessings over your life. May you have a totally meaningful life in the eyes of God, and may God bless you. Fear God and keep His commandments. God bless you.